Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. This is Kay back at it with a new video. In this video, we're going to discuss why it's getting more and more difficult for seniors to retire. Let's talk about it. Used to be a time when you decided to sit down, the company gave you a gold watch and you had like a pension plus Social Security. You were doing okay. You can probably take maybe a trip or two a year and, be able to comfortably live a great retirement. Those days, however, are over. Nowadays, you have majority of the seniors struggling in retirement if they can retire. If you're one of the lucky that you're able to sit down and enjoy the fruits of your life after working 30 to 40 years of hard labor or just labor in general, you're one of the lucky because nowadays you have people working well into their 80s if they can find a job just to be able to survive. Nowadays, retirement is a luxury. It's a luxury because the money just isn't there. Things just cost so much these days. Groceries, shelter, utilities, and don't forget, your medical needs. If you got some illnesses that require more medical, then that can be costly as well, especially when you start talking about medications. Now, yeah, you can get on Medicare, and Medicare will cover some of it, or you can get the Medicare Part D. I'm not no expert at it, but then that costs a little extra as well. So when you factor in how much you would be getting in Social Security, it's not a whole lot to begin with. And what the federal government try to do is keep the inflation rate low because your yearly increase is tied to inflation. So when we had those couple of years when inflation was high, around like 9, 10% the last couple of years back, that was good because most seniors was getting like $100 to $150 increase in their benefit. But now the Fed then got it down to around 3 or a little under 3, where you're not getting so much now. You're probably lucky if you get maybe $30 or $40, but then you factor in everything around you going up, not going down. $40 don't really move the needle any. It makes it even more difficult. And if you don't have a pension or any type of savings or investments, anything like that, you're pretty much screwed in retirement. Are people living a life for the rich and famous? No. Most seniors, and there are exceptions, so, don't get mad at me, but majority of the seniors are living a bare bone existence, meaning that their money can only cover their expenses. Traveling and living life. Yeah, you could do it probably on your couch watching somebody else on TV doing it, but for you to really get out there and spend money you don't have is probably impossible because, again, the average Social Security recipient, they actually live below poverty. I think the average senior is lucky if they can get close to $25,000 a year. But most are under $25,000 a year. Now, you probably in your working life, if you had a middle class job, you was probably making about 55 to 60,000. So think about that. If you're making under 25,000 now, half of your income is gone. So that's why it's important when you before you retire, that you try to get as much as you can get while you're working. You know, if you can pay off your house, that's a major right there. And if you can pay off car notes, that's another major. And if you was able to get some of the things you need repaired on your house, well, that would really help too, because that's one less thing you got to deal with. If you know your roof is leaking, or you know you need sidewalks, or you know the plumbing is bad or the electrical is bad, it makes sense to get that stuff done while you're working, because once you stop working, then it can get a little dicey, especially if you don't have any savings anywhere. You know, and in one of my other videos, I talked about the reverse mortgage, and you should watch that video. It talks about how much you can really get from the reverse mortgage and the fees. You know, so you know, that would probably be an option if you're in dire straits. Then you got to look at, you know, family members still living at home with their senior parents, because they're not faring any better. You know, yeah, they got jobs, but the jobs don't pay a whole lot, so they really can't afford to get their own place. So now you got adult children still living at home, because you know it's becoming so unaffordable for them as well. Now, when you look at seniors that's probably got some alcohol issues or some drug issues or some cigarette issues, you know, in retirement, that, you know, it really doesn't fly, because you really don't have money for those type of expensive habits, you know, especially cigarettes and drugs, because you know those two things can really eat into your money, and you really won't have a lot left over to do anything else. You know, now you do have some seniors, they move to like cheaper countries. Like you see the passport bros on YouTube where they move to the Philippines, and they don't live in Manila, because Manila is like they world class city. What they do is they move to some of the outskirts, the low income areas where their money can go further. You know, if you get like maybe, you know, $1,500 to $2,000 in Social Security, well, yeah, if you live in the outskirts of the Philippines, well, yeah, your money is stretched far. You know, you can live a comfortable life. But if you try to take that same money in America and you try to pay a rent or try to get a mortgage or something like that, that can be really dicey for you, because you know your money don't go that far. And I did a posting on senior expenses. You ought to check that out, where it talks about how I did a breakdown of, you know, if a senior got X amount of dollars, you know, how that money can easily disappear with just your expenses. You know, now you do have like senior living and places like that, but most people want their independence, and they don't want that type of lifestyle, so they prefer to be out here, you know, living amongst younger people, you know, because it makes you feel younger, you know. And I worked senior living, and you know, some of it can be a little depressing. You know, I didn't work in the high end of it, so I don't know how that works out. But I'm speaking in general of just senior living. You know, especially if your children are coming to visit you, or you're not having any visitors in general. You know, you just sitting there watching the cars, like I said, go back and forth. You know, but again. You know, you're not really living a rich and famous lifestyle for the average senior on retirement, because, you know, the money isn't really there. And like I was saying, it's more or less stretching your money and doing more free things. You know, a Medicare, the Advantage Care rather, they pay for the gym. So, you know, you can take advantage of that. And if you can get into some free, swimming pools or anything that's free where that's activities. But the really jet set, I think that's for the number one percentage of people. Other than that, it can be tough going depending on your situation. And like I was saying, if you really want to, get ahead of the curveball, you have to, while you're working, try to save as much as you can, possibly try to invest, pay off some things like high credit cards and any other kind of debt. Whatever frontage you need, probably try to get that now. Like you want your nice, comfortable bed. Well, while you're working, if you can do it, do that. Try to pay off that car payment. And if you really are ambitious, try to pay off your mortgage because those are the things that can make life miserable for you and force you back out there to go get a part-time job, at 70 and 80 because you got to try to make ends meet. So it's food for thought. Again, this is Kay back at it with a new video. Take care, guys.